Hi everyone, I'm Sanjana, J&J's Fireside Chat Coordinator, and I'm here with Ivana for another Fireside Chat. Ivana, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here.
All right, so to start off, please tell us about your educational and professional backgrounds and the path that you took to get to where you are today.
So the reason why I am excited about this opportunity is because I'm going to be soon celebrating my 20th anniversary since my family and myself, we arrived to the United States and started a brand new life. Many things happened, of course, before the brand new life happened. And because I went to elementary, middle school and high school and higher education, not in the US, my experiences may not necessarily apply all that to high school, students in the States. However, there are some similarities, and I would probably say that when I went to school, I studied economics. The one difference between high school in Slovakia and in the United States is that you can actually pick a high school with a professional background of some sort, almost like a vocational school here, but at the end you do get your diploma. So I was nowhere near close to marketing. At that political climate back in Slovak Republic, there was no such a thing as marketing because there really wasn't a free market. So when I started my career after finishing my studies in economics, I was in a finance department, doing reporting, comparing numbers, whole bunch of accounting work. And it wasn't fun. It's a very important job, but it wasn't fun for me. So slowly and surely, I made my way to a local commercial bank, probably the biggest that exists there. And believe or not, I've decided I'm going to start in there in the mailroom. That was the opening they've had. So from my economics and finance, I ended up delivering mail to various departments and chatting alongside of my duties. And that brought me within 2 or 3 weeks to land a position of executive assistant of the director of this bank. Again, nothing to do with marketing, but the political climate changed at that time, and we became a free democratic country with all sorts of opportunities that never existed before, marketing one of them. Slowly and surely, we created a position for a person that was at the beginning about, donation requests, setting up corporate holiday parties, making pretty brochures. But then the responsibilities evolved, and we were doing demographic research, preparing, opening new branches. So in the true form of marketing persona, I ended up doing something that I didn't even know it existed when I started. And after moving to the States, my marketing career got another, snafu going on because number one, I didn't speak English. My husband did, but I didn't. So there's no such a thing as advertising world, media outreach, if you don't speak the language. I ended up working part-time shift in a grocery store and going to local high school to learn English as a second language, as many other, people who move to this country do. And eventually I found myself a job as a teller, again in a banking industry. It was something that I knew. And from there, my supervisors, my colleagues did hear my story, just like you're listening to it now. And eventually there was a marketing opening that I applied for. From the very beginning, it was a marketing assistant, more of a clerical position within marketing department than anything else. But I believe it's my 12th year working with my colleagues. So currently I am a VP and a marketing analyst in Kearny Bank, and I love my job. I really do. I love the new heights that digital marketing can bring you. I love brainstorming with my colleagues. It's a dream come true. So in many words, this is how I ended up where I am.
That's so awesome. And it was very fascinating to hear about all these different opportunities you pursued and just hearing about the path that you took to get to where you are. And, it's not super often that you hear that someone goes through a lot of different things and ends up, where they are and like really loves it. A lot of the times, like, if you do go through like a lot of different opportunities and things, like you might end up lost along the way. Like on the one hand, you could end up in your position where you end up somewhere where you really love it, but at the same time, there's that other hand too. So it's very interesting to hear that you
It
ended
is
up somewhere
definitely,
amazing.
you can get lost, but
Yeah,
knock on wood, I somehow managed to finagle without really sidetracking myself way too much.
right. Yeah, yeah, because I know, like, even just, like, personally speaking, like, with, my dad, he kind of was in the same place where he immigrated to the United States, and he sort of ended up in a position where he is mostly, like, doing it because, yes, he does have interest in it, but it's also, like, that survival aspect and component, like, he wants to make money and, like, fend for myself and my sister, so it's really interesting to hear that you ended up somewhere where you genuinely feel like you have a passion towards the job.
I absolutely did, and I do consider myself lucky. It is a privilege. It's not an everyday situation. So for that, I am very grateful.
All right, so moving on, did you have any significant extracurricular experiences in high school and or college that you feel really helped you on later in your career?
I actually did, and while it was in high school here, I still think this might be a little funny story to hear for today's students. Number one activity I really participated in throughout my whole schooling, time was competition in poetry recitation. And I know it sounds a little funny, like what kind of reciting poetry can do for you. Well, lots of things actually, because you're judged by your tempo, by your pronunciation, by all sorts of technical aspects, and then by your delivery, emotions, if these are the right emotions for the type of poetry you picked. So if one wants to interact with many people, well, I don't think there is a job where you don't interact with people, right? But in marketing and communications, it's even more important. Everyone has a tendency, especially when people get a little nervous, kind of rumble through. So many times in my life, I kind of went back and said, wait a minute, the judges wouldn't give you 10 for this. So it's something that I'm using throughout my life. And when I did it, I would never really think that this will do anything for me later in life. Apparently it does. And another funny activity I did through my earlier schooling was another competition in botany. It was a thing for kind of like a club that you studied plants and learned their English, or in my case Slovak name, and their Latin names, and you learned about where they grow and what do you need to do for them to grow, about wildflowers, what are the really important ones that are almost on the brink of disappearing. And this thing was, it wasn't really hands-on activity. We didn't go in garden and dig holes in there. It was more of a memorization of all that stuff. So I don't know if it is true that if you exercise your brain a certain way, it may get better at things. Certainly doesn't work for singing, but I think I can remember insane amount of information and retain it in my head without really writing it down. And I think it might have something to do with those years of memorization and competitions. And you were literally scored just on how much stuff you can spit out right there on a spot through oral exam or written exams. And they were very rigorous about this. So that's another random school activity that I did, and I think it can help.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it sounds like, you learned a lot about, like, discipline and public speaking and memorization, as you said, so I can definitely see how all those activities would help you later on.
Yep, but however random and strange were, and my mom was a teacher, so as a teacher's child, I was not forced to, but forced to. Like, if you were not a good student, if you didn't have at least 6, 7 clubs, so these were the most prominent ones.
That's so great to hear. So my last question for you is what advice would you give to young people who will be embarking on their professional lives soon?
Not one, maybe two very important ones. Number one, languages. Many students already come from bilingual languages. Many don't. But you know what? Coming to a completely different country, completely different culture, being a growing up adult, I wasn't a child when we moved here, I was an adult. Not knowing what is going on around you, I felt like I don't have legs and hands. It was really humiliating on some level. It was very, very insecure for me. And when you think about it, everyone has this opportunity. The schools do teach languages, and for the most part, it seems like kids take it, "Oh, okay, well, I have Spanish class." Don't do it. Really believe it. It might help. It might get you a better job. It might uncover opportunity that otherwise wouldn't be presented. I'm actually thinking that now, when I somehow speak English, and believe it or not, it's still very funny for an adult in a different country, because if I go to a doctor's office and then they start, talking about diagnosis or use medical terms that you're not necessarily use in your everyday life, I need to stop them and say, "I'm sorry, I know it sounds a little funny, but can you explain what this means?" So the learning is throughout your life. And I'm thinking I should start with Spanish. It's a very prominent language here, and it can get me, another opportunity that you never know would possibly can come up. So languages, by all means, take it seriously. And then another one, I remember when I was 18 and I had to make a decision what I'm gonna do with my life. And kids here, when they decide on colleges and go, not go, what major, make a decision now, go undecided. I think it's a lot of stress for a young adult to go through these things. And my son just graduated college. I feel it's not really that important. I feel that the pressure doesn't need to be there. As I said, I was a finance person, now doing marketing. And yes, it took some time, but I landed where I'm happy. We have my husband's forestry engineer, and he is a software developer now. So there are things that can direct your path a little subtle way. And the decision that, I'm signing up to study literature, and now what I'm going to do with my life, it's not really that deciding. It doesn't define you at the moment. And I do see many young people being really stressed over this, stressed to the point that should not be. They are young, the life is ahead of them. There's a whole bunch of adventure waiting for everyone. And you know what? Talk to your counselors, talk to your parents, your older peers. But if possible, don't stress about it that much.
Wow, that was really amazing advice and genuinely some advice that I needed to hear today. So thank you so much for sharing and thank you for everything you shared during this session. This was a great session.
No problem. It was my pleasure, really.